Hello and welcome back after lunch. This is always the hardest spot of the day, I think, because everybody's a bit snoozy and drowsy now, so I'll try and keep you awake with all of this chat. So thanks very much for inviting me, and thanks to Anne-Marie and Kirsten for saving the day this morning, because we had a bit of an issue with the presentation, but it's all fine now. And as Anne-Marie was saying, I think a few of you will recognise me from the kind of brain injury world. I'm mostly from the rehab background and spent quite a lot of years in Murdstone Brain Injury Centre. So it is lovely to be back, partly just in person, just to see people and see a lot of familiar faces, but also talking about something absolutely brand new. So there's been, oh, that is the one, yes. There has been, let me do it back again. Yep. There's been talk about a major trauma network across Scotland for quite a number of years, probably about 10 or 12 years, I think. And today's just about the developments in the west of Scotland. So we're going to spend a wee bit of time. I'm going to do the first bit, and then Ashley will follow up with a more specific head injury information. So we'll have a look at why there needs to be a trauma network across Scotland. What are the benefits of that? We'll think a bit about what an actual major trauma is, what that consists of. We'll look at how the West of Scotland Major Trauma Centre opening has affected the wards in the hospital and the surrounding hospitals. We'll have a little look at the new roles. So there's coordinators and there's head injury advanced practitioners. So we'll talk a bit about that. And a little bit about how this traumatic brain injury service fits into the bigger picture of ABI and the current services that are out there. And hopefully, once we've done all of that, there might be some time for questions. We'll see. So let me see if I can get this right. There we go. So the development of the Scottish Trauma Network has been ongoing, and the first of those centres opened in 2018. And then because of COVID, there's been a bit of a hiatus, so we've not kind of completed that whole opening until now. So the Scottish Trauma Network is designed to deliver the highest quality, integrated, multi-specialty care for severely injured patients. So that's about getting all of the disciplines to collaborate across all the specialities that they work in and around that single patient, rather than that patient having to be posted out to various different specialty services, really. So we'll start with identifying what a major trauma patient is. And that's really part of the 999 call right at the beginning. So there's a bit of diagnosing and deciding that happens at that point about what the best treatment might be for that person, even before anybody's even clapped eyes on them. And the reason they would do that at the call centre is that it could be time critical. So if you have some idea about what's happened to someone, you would know if it's important that they get very quickly to somewhere that can save their life, or are they okay to wait a few more minutes and get to somewhere that all the specialties are there to give them the best treatment that they need at that time. So you're looking for things like rapid access to CT scans, or maybe to theatres for surgery, or maybe to neurosurgery. And I don't know if any of you, I think some of you have already mentioned that you've seen the Channel 4 series, Rescue Extreme Medics. And that's followed the trauma service across all of Scotland, but quite a lot of it was in Glasgow, so that was nice. Nice to see all your colleagues on the TV. And in that programme, they talked about having the hospital, being able to take the hospital to the wilderness, and that's the whole idea of this kind of saving lives. But there's also a new emphasis on the rehabilitation in the very early stages. And so not only should we get better at saving lives across Scotland, but we should be able to give those lives back through the rehabilitation that's on offer. So I think when you think about major trauma, this is probably what comes to mind, this very dramatic scene. And if something happens out on the mountainsides in Scotland, there might be 15 or 20 people involved with that. So there might be the Mountain Rescue or Coast Guard or RNLI, police. And it's all very headline grabbing, and it's great for the film crews to follow that round. And that, of course, is a big part of what major trauma is. But there's also the call handlers that I spoke about there, and the ambulance service. And they've been working, I would say, probably in that whole time across that 10 years, getting better at identifying who needs what kind of treatment and when. So they'll look at the first three things that they would look at is what's the extent of the bleeding, is that brain working, and are they breathing? And from that they can make a decision as to what and where that treatment is going to be. Then they'd look maybe at the type of the injury. Is it a penetrating injury, especially if that's in the head? How damaged is their torso? Are they paralysed? And then they would also give consideration to how that accident has happened. So has it been a high-speed crash? Has it been a fall from a great height? And one of the things that can often tell you how badly damaged someone might be is if someone else has died in that incident. So taking all of that into account, they can decide how major this trauma is. But of course, there's a great variety of traumas, and some of them are very dramatic, and some of them are a little bit more mundane. So car accidents are also a big part of where the major trauma patients come from. But it can also be trauma in your own home. And I think something that I probably didn't appreciate until we started doing this job was that there's a bit of a seasonal aspect to trauma, and quite a lot of people fall out of their lofts getting their Christmas decorations out. So take it from me, put your helmet on, get your your elbow pads on if you're going to get your Christmas decorations down. And also, I would say that the more dramatic the accident is, doesn't always mean that the more traumatic the injuries are. So a bit of a comparison on one of the days that I was at work, we had a young woman who had just moved into her new house with her husband. As she reached the top of the stairs, she slipped on the plastic covering that was over the carpet to when the painters were in. She fell backwards, so her full height and the height of the stairs, and gave herself quite a significant brain injury and a few other a few other broken bones. And she was in the hospital for weeks and weeks on end. But that same day, down in Recess, we met a driver who was in a head-on smash. So he was going at 60 miles an hour, and he met another car at 60, so it was a 120 mile an hour impact. He was trapped in his car for about 40 minutes while the fire service cut him out. He arrived in A&E on the spinal board. He had a neck brace on, he had splints, he's covered in blood, but it turned out that he had a cut above his eye. He had a broken collarbone and a fractured rib and a bit of bruising from the seatbelt. So he was home in 24 hours after observation. So it doesn't always tie in that the more dramatic the accident is, the worse the trauma will be. So on the 30th of August last year, the West of Scotland Major Trauma Centre went live. And once it was opened, we started receiving patients into a brand new ward in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. And once we had opened this ward, we had 24 beds for polytrauma patients. And those are people with complex injuries who'll benefit from intensive input from the 7-day service that we have from our OTs and physios, our speech and language therapists, psychologists, and obviously the doctors, nurses, the major trauma coordinators, the head injury advanced practitioners. And together, all of those staff create a rehab plan that's going to follow that person from their first hours in hospital all the way to hopefully into community and whatever they need there. So it has been amazing to be involved with something like this. And I think particularly, I'm sure a lot of you here have attended the Scottish Trauma Network conferences over the years, and but I've just been watching it from the sidelines, so it's lovely to be right in the centre of things now. So, as we're saying, across Scotland now, all 4 of the major trauma centres are open. So 3 of those have paediatrics attached as well. So there are major trauma centres are specific for the paediatric needs. And there's a team, a similar team, in fact, almost identical team to what has been created for the adult trauma, exists for the paediatric trauma as well. So those 4 trauma centres are linked to 9 major trauma units, and they have all the emergency care, but maybe not as much of the highly specialist input. Things like interventional radiology or neurology are based in the major trauma centres. And there's a further 13 local emergency hospitals that support the network as well. So, in the west of Scotland, all these little bubbles here, we're connected as a major trauma centre to all these major trauma units, and it'll be feeding in and out of each other as patients appear either at those units because it's been a time-critical incident, or at the major trauma centre because it's been about the specialities that they need to access. So since this major trauma network went live in the west of Scotland, we've been striving for better coordination between all those hospitals that are involved in the area, and to get those patients the right care at the right time for them. So how do we do that? So we've got major trauma coordinators. So that's where we come in. And I'm one of 5 that are based in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, but we've colleagues in Ayrshire and Arran, in Lanarkshire, Dumfries and Galloway, Argyll and Clyde in the Highland NHS, Forth Valley, and a couple of the Glasgow hospitals as well. And some of my colleagues are here. You'll be able to meet them as you're going round today, so make yourselves known to everyone. So we have the opportunity as coordinators across the whole network to be in touch weekly. So there's an opportunity for us all to catch up then. But there are times when we're probably in touch more often than that, probably on a daily basis, as someone is getting ready to transfer home. But for me, you can see here in some of these pictures, the job starts as the patient arrives, whether that's in the helicopter or in the ambulance, and I'll be with that patient the whole time that they're in resus and in A&E, keeping track of every visiting speciality that comes down to see them, whether it's a consultant or a team of people, keeping a note of any medication that they get, what the interventions have been, if we've got, when they've had bloods taken, what scans they've had, what x-rays they've had, so that the consultants and the specialists can use that information to decide what the priority is for that patient, and what their immediate treatment needs to be. And if I can, that's a good time to make contact with the family so that they can be involved from the very beginning. And often it's quite a tense time, particularly if they've come from quite far away, and they're coming in the helicopter and they're leaving loved ones at the scene who don't know what's happening next. So I can be on the phone to families as they're travelling into the hospital and hopefully putting their mind at rest that everything's being looked at. So once somebody's out of A&E, along with the head injury advanced practitioners, we'll be following that patient through their stay in critical care and onto the ward, and trying to keep that patient and their family sort of up to date with what's likely to be happening next and what the consequences of that are. And also, we're in a position to take back some of the questions to the various specialties for that patient and the family. And at that stage, we start that kind of contact with the coordinators in the local area, so that we know what the pathway is likely to be for that person. I'm quite lucky that mostly that's ward-based for me, but the head injury practitioners can be in any corner of the hospital, and you'll hear more about that from Ashley. So then we're at the stage when we're hoping to plan the patient's discharge, and either that could be a repatriation back to their local hospital for continued care and input there, or it might be straight home. This turns out to be the most challenging part of the job, I would say. So it would be lovely if everybody that came in to a major trauma centre actually lived in that area, but of course that's not the nature of trauma. So we're trying to get people back to. We've just recently, in the last couple of weeks, got somebody back to France, somebody back to Holland, somebody back down to Coventry. But everything is kind of knocked off course with the current bed pressures, with transport issues. So a lot of our time is spent on the phone then with coordinators, or emailing, or with the information as it changes. And I think the other thing that has been an issue is that the patients themselves have been through an awful lot, and they change minute to minute sometimes, and so they seem to be stable when you make that decision that it's time to get them home, but they may change. Or a consultant comes onto the ward and reviews an X-ray and says, oh, here's another bit of surgery that that we could do here. Or sometimes specialist rehab suddenly has a bed available, and so now we've got to pick up everything that we thought we had 6 days or 10 days to do and get them all ready. But so I think that's our kind of work in progress, is to how do we get our coordination a bit more smooth, so that it's not too stressful for those patients going through. So there's a lot of negotiating and a lot of feedback from that. So thinking about brain injury specifically, I just want to reinforce that there still needs to be good representation for all of acquired brain injury through roles like Claire's. I don't know if Claire's still here. She said she might be going by now, but something like, oh, hello. So that kind of role for a specialist head injury nurse working along with Dr. Koo that we heard this morning. We kind of need to ensure that while all eyes are on the major trauma network just now, that these essential brain injury services aren't forgotten about, and that there's still access to the specialist rehab, and that can be available and equitable right through. Because as amazing as a development as the Major Trauma Centre is, it will only impact traumatic brain injury, and not all traumatic brain injury is major trauma. So it's not the whole group, it's not the whole extent of brain injury. But we do have some new superheroes advocating for traumatic brain injury, and here's one of them right here. So I'll let you take on the next part.
So I'm just going to give a quick overview of our role, which is brand new. So like Kay said, we are based at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, and I'll go with what Kay said there about not all brain injury is major trauma. We are part of the major trauma team, and we're funded by them, but actually that's probably only about a third of our patient caseload. And I'll go on to describe about kind of who we see and what our patients look like as well. As far as I'm aware, we're the first kind of our kind of head injury advanced practitioners within Scotland, but we're based in a role from a Southampton hospital, and we've all been in post for just a year. So I'm going to take you through to introduce you to the team first of all, and then give you a wee overview of kind of the patients we see and what we do. So we're just a small team of 3. Firstly, we have Andrew. So Andrew has almost 20 years experience within neurosurgery as a staff nurse and intensive care charge nurse. and then has spent the past 3 years working as advanced nurse practitioner in neurosurgery and MaxVac. So Andrew brings a huge wealth of experience with him dealing with neurosurgery in head injured patients. We then have Megan, who is with me today here. So Megan qualified with her nursing degree in Dundee, but then returned to Glasgow and has gained extensive knowledge through the neurosurgical wards and intensive care before starting this role. And she's currently undertaking her advanced practice diploma at Glasgow Cali as well. Then myself, I'm a little bit of a curveball, so I'm a physiotherapist to trade. I've been qualified for almost 13 years with a variety of different specialties, but predominantly in intensive care in the surgical wards at Cross House, which is where our head injured patients, where they would kind of stay and where their journey would be. And I joined Megan in going through my training programme just now as well, so we should be fully qualified as advanced practitioners by next year. So that's, sorry, no, it's fine. So it was supposed to be a flowchart of our referral process, but I'll just chat you through where we are. So we, as I say, are based in-house at the Queen Elizabeth, so we see inpatients only. So we see these patients from their point of admission to the point of discharge. Our patients are all traumatic head injuries with a CT scan that's been kind of positive for an acute bleed. So long as it's a traumatic mechanism and there's blood in the head there, then we'll see these patients at any point in that just in-hospital journey. Our main aim really is to establish a service that gives seamless care to this patient group, because like Kay mentioned, at the moment, patients with traumatic head injury are nursed for all over the Queen Elizabeth campus. They can be in any ward in any setting, but the hope is that we are part of that continuity for that patient the whole way through their journey. So that takes us to the emergency department, intensive care, general wards, and obviously the neurosurgical institute as well. The biggest part of our job is probably being that liaison between neurosurgery and the team that are looking after the patient. We kind of help to keep the door open and keep that conversation going, because quite often it had been maybe historically that it would be said, patient's not for neurosurgery, and that felt like the end of the conversation, whereas we would try and either give an update or give medical management to the team that are looking after that patient as well, and advise maybe where another scan would be helpful or certain bloods that needs to be looked at in that patient's stay as well. So we're there going into the ward so we can assess these patients. We'll be able to prescribe, but one of our kind of focuses as well is looking at early referral to the correct and appropriate services. So we work very closely with Dr. Koo, who was on earlier, to kind of seek his advice or about our patients as well. Who we're overseen by mainly is we have a neurosurgical consultant who we go to, who we would discuss our patient cases with and our decisions with as well. So we've always got somebody to oversee and to discuss things through as well. But we're also part of other teams as well. So again, part of major trauma, part of that big MDT, and link in with other services, kind of firstly probably within the hospital, and then would make the referrals onwards to some of the community teams. What I would definitely say is we've only been in post for a year, and it's a brand new role within a brand new service, as Kay was saying. So we're really trying to establish our role and find out how basically we can best serve and be advocates for the patient group of traumatic brain injuries. And even today, just listening, a big thing obviously people are saying is it's that early support and signposting seems to be a common theme so far. So just from being here today, actually, this is Megan and I's first time here, there's lots that we can take away, from your feedback that we'll certainly think about as we establish our role and move forwards. And we'd certainly be happy for any questions either just now or later if you would like to pick our brains.
Any questions? Do you see any hands? Any questions?
One out of the back there.
Well, you just want to keep me fit after my lunch, don't you?
Make a run for it.
Sorry, Ashley. I'm going to have to ask you a question. I used to work with Ashley at Cross House. I'm one of the Inspire nurses and recovery coordinators in Cross House. Do you foresee a connection there in the future of if your trauma centre patients are coming back to having a connection there? Is that something that you see in the future that we can collaborate together and work that way?
So a connection with Inspire?
With the recovery coordinators?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's, again, the more we learn about what's available in local hostels and the local trauma units, then the more we can link in with there as well. But I think definitely if people are going to get the follow-up like Inspire and the recovery coordinators, that's definitely something that we would, when patients are getting discharged, be trying to link in and work with as well. I think that's a difficult thing, isn't it? We're trying to learn just now, because each, you know, Kay gave you kind of 5 hostels there in the trauma units. They all got some money through the major trauma network and have all spent it in very, very different ways to what resources they're getting. So we're still learning that and knowing when our patients go back there, who are the best people to, I suppose, refer them to and give that information to. But yeah, definitely within Inspire and the coordinators, we'll definitely keep that in mind moving forwards, absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Other end of the hall.
I was just wondering, do you have a facility in your pathway to link in private providers for like case management?
So we don't at the moment, actually, and just being here today, when hearing about case management, that's not something we've been aware of as yet. So probably is, again, something we're keen to learn about or link in with and know how we can kind of best work together. Yeah, definitely.
We're certainly based in Hamilton.
Okay.
I think we're really interested in linking in with you.
Yeah, perfect.
Being involved into the service that we can provide.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we do have patients that have been involved in RTAs, you know, then we can pick up that early intervention, which is what we're really keen to do.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it can help bridge that gap between with the NHS services and the private provision. And because that is available to patients if the fund is in place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just so that you're very much aware of that, so we can link in.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's great.
I have a big loud voice too.
Okay, good.
On the back of that question, hello, Part-Time Care. Is there going to be involvement of solicitors at that sort of point as well? Because that was something that was talked about by the NHS, I think, from government papers that were resourced about how those clients or patients who are damaged people can get that involvement from case management and from solicitors from the minute they've had their accident.
I'll maybe pass it to Kate, or if you know a wee bit more.
I'm not I don't know is the short answer to that. I don't know. And I think what we can do from today is go back and find out a bit more about that, because I think, you know, having been involved and having watched this all develop over the past decade or so, I am aware that has been mooted at certain, yes, at various points, but how that's actually going to work in practice, I don't know yet. And I think we're still, you know, it's a bit like we were hearing Sheena saying we are kind of inching forward just now, because there's an awful lot to try and get right, and you're trying to get it right for every single patient that you know that you see. But just because I have been aware of this for a lot longer, it's in the back of my head all the time. But I don't know yet. But now that we've been here, now you've asked the question, I'll go and find out.
I know you've been there for a year, but it's really good that this message from ABI survivors is actually getting through to the people that have seen it first, which is grand.
Thank you, Dee. I do think both ladies have answered the questions that Dr. Kuga asked this morning, so that's good. You've got the answers to them, but we have run out of time now. So I'd like you to put your hands together and thank you.